The sound of a rifle shot echoed across the dusty main street of Fort Stockton, Texas, sending 10-year-old Lily Kennedy scrambling beneath the porch of Hanson's General Store, her heart pounding against her ribs like a frightened rabbit. It wasn't outlaws this time, just old Mr. Peterson firing at a rattlesnake that had slithered too close to the water trough. Fort Stockton in 1878 was no place for a widow and her children, but Lucinda Kennedy had nowhere else to go after her husband's fever took him last winter. Lily. Emma, her 7-year-old sister, called from the doorway of the store. "Mama says come help with the groceries." Lily crawled out from her hiding place, brushing the West Texas dirt from her faded blue dress. She straightened her shoulders like Mama had taught her and pretended she hadn't been scared at all. Inside the general store, Lucinda Kennedy stood at the counter, her slender fingers counting out precious pennies from a small cloth purse. At 32, grief had etched fine lines around her eyes, but hadn't dimmed the determined spark in them. Her once fine dress had been mended so many times that the original pattern was barely visible beneath the careful stitches. "That'll be all, Mr. Hanson," Lucinda said, sliding the last penny across the worn wooden counter. The shopkeeper glanced at the meager pile of supplies: a small sack of flour, coffee, a few potatoes, and a precious tin of kerosene for the lamp. "Mrs. Kennedy, I could extend you a bit more credit if you need." "No, thank you." Lucinda's voice was soft but firm. "We'll manage with what we have." "Mama, can we get candy?" 4-year-old Samuel tugged at her skirts, his wide eyes fixed on the glass jar of peppermint sticks on the counter. "Not today, darling." Lucinda smoothed his unruly brown hair. "But perhaps next time." Lily watched her mother's face carefully. There would be no next time for candy, not unless something changed. The small vegetable garden behind their tiny rented house at the edge of town couldn't feed 4 mouths, and the laundry and mending Lucinda took in barely paid for the roof over their heads. The bell above the door jingled as a tall man entered, ducking his head slightly beneath the doorframe. Dust clung to his travel-worn clothes, and a weathered cowboy hat sat atop dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. Behind him trailed a boy about Lily's age and a younger girl who peered around shyly. "Afternoon, Mr. Hanson," the man said, his voice deep with a slight drawl. "Just arrived in town. Need to stock up before we settle in." "Thomas Hayes," the shopkeeper grinned broadly. "Heard you might be coming back to these parts. Welcome to Fort Stockton." The stranger, Mr. Hayes, nodded politely toward Lucinda and her children. His eyes, the color of a summer storm, lingered for just a moment on her face before he turned back to the shopkeeper. "Got that ranch south of town finally," he said. "The old Miller place. Good land," Mr. Hanson replied. "Needs work, but good land." "That it does." Mr. Hayes placed a hand on the shoulder of the boy beside him. "This is my son, James, and my daughter, Catherine." The girl, who couldn't have been more than 6, gave a shy smile that showed a missing front tooth. The boy stood straight-backed like his father but kept his eyes on the floor. "And who might these fine young people be?" Mr. Hayes asked, nodding toward Lily and her siblings. Before Lucinda could answer, the door burst open and Sheriff Wilson stepped inside, his usually placid face creased with concern. "Mrs. Kennedy, good thing I found you," he said, removing his hat. "Town meeting's been called for tomorrow afternoon. Mayor wants everyone there, especially those with children." "What's happened?" Lucinda asked, her arm instinctively drawing Samuel closer. "School roofs finally given way after that storm last week. Buildings not safe. Need to decide what to do before winter sets in." The sheriff nodded to Mr. Hayes. "You must be Thomas Hayes. Mayor will want you there too, seeing as you've got school-age children yourself." As the adults spoke, Lily found herself studying the Hayes children. The boy, James, finally looked up and met her gaze directly. There was something in his eyes, not quite sadness, but a wariness she recognized all too well. It was the same look she saw in her own reflection since Papa died. "We'll be there, Sheriff," Lucinda was saying as she gathered her purchases. "Come along, children." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. Lucinda balanced the small bundle of supplies in one arm while holding Samuel's hand with the other. "Mama," Lily said quietly as they walked toward their small house on the edge of town. "That man in the store, Mr. Hayes," Lucinda supplied, adjusting Samuel on her hip as he began to tire. "His children didn't have a mother with them." Lucinda's steps slowed for just a moment. "Not everyone's circumstances are the same, Lily. It's not polite to pry." "I wasn't prying," Lily protested. "Just noticing." Emma skipped ahead, seemingly untroubled by such observations. "Can I help make supper, Mama?" "Of course, sweet pea." Lucinda smiled, though Lily could see the worry that never quite left her mother's eyes these days. Their home was a small two-room structure that had once been a storeroom behind what used to be the first hotel in Fort Stockton. The hotel had burned down years ago, leaving only this humble outbuilding that Lucinda had made into a home after selling their farm. A vegetable garden struggled to survive in the hard Texas soil, protected from roaming livestock by a makeshift fence of salvaged wood. Inside, Lucinda set down their supplies and immediately began preparing their modest supper. Lily helped Emma set out the mismatched plates while Samuel arranged the 3 forks with solemn concentration. "Will they really close the school, Mama?" Emma asked as they sat down to eat. "I don't know, darling." Lucinda served the simple potato soup, stretching it as far as she could. "That's why we need to attend the town meeting." "I don't want to stop learning," Lily said firmly. She'd been the top of her class before Papa died, and her teacher, Miss Abbott, had said she might even become a teacher herself someday if she kept up her studies. Lucinda reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Education is important. Your father always said so." Her voice caught slightly on the mention of her late husband. "We'll find a way, I promise." That night, after the children were asleep, Lily and Emma sharing the small bed in the corner while Samuel slept on a pallet near the stove, Lucinda sat by the window, mending a tear in Lily's only other dress by the dim light of the kerosene lamp. Outside, the vast Texas sky sparkled with stars, unconcerned with the worries of a widow trying to raise 3 children alone in a town that grew harsher with each passing season. The following afternoon, the town hall was packed with nearly every resident of Fort Stockton. Lucinda guided her children to a bench near the back, smoothing her best dress, the navy blue one she kept for Sundays and special occasions. Mayor Blackwell, a portly man with an impressive mustache, stood at the front of the room, raising his hands for silence. "Folks, as you know, the schoolhouse roof collapsed in last week's storm. We've had the building looked at, and I'm afraid the news isn't good. The whole structure's unsound." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "What about our children's education?" called out Mrs. Abbott, the school teacher. "That's why we're here," the mayor replied. "We need to decide what to do. Building a new school would cost money this town doesn't have right now." From her seat, Lucinda could see Thomas Hayes standing near the side wall, his children beside him. In the daylight, she noticed lines of care etched into his tanned face, a face that had seen its share of hardship, she guessed. "I propose we suspend formal schooling until next spring," the mayor continued. "By then, perhaps we can. That's nearly 6 months away." Lucinda found herself on her feet before she realized she meant to speak. All eyes turned toward her, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she pressed on. "Our children can't afford to lose half a year of learning. Many of them, mine included, have already faced enough setbacks." A few murmurs of agreement rose from other parents. "Unless you have a building to offer, Mrs. Kennedy," the mayor said with a hint of condescension, "or the funds to repair the school, I don't see what choice we have." Before Lucinda could respond, Thomas Hayes stepped forward, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. "What if we repair it ourselves?" he suggested. "I've built plenty of structures on my ranch in Colorado. If the town can provide materials, I'd be willing to contribute my labor and know-how." "That's mighty generous, Mr. Hayes," the mayor said, "but we're still talking about considerable expense for lumber and supplies. What if we all pitch in?" This came from Mr. Thompson, the blacksmith. "I can donate some hardware, nails, and such." Others began to voice similar offers, small contributions that might add up to enough. Lucinda felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. "I can help with the teaching while repairs are underway," she offered. "I taught at a school back east before I was married." This was met with surprised looks. In the 2 years since moving to Fort Stockton after her husband's death, Lucinda had kept mostly to herself, focusing on her children and the various jobs she took to make ends meet. "Is that so, Mrs. Abbott asked with interest. "I could certainly use the assistance, especially if we need to hold classes in a temporary space." The meeting continued with growing enthusiasm as the town began to form a plan. They would hold classes in the church while repairs were made to the school. Those with skills would contribute labor, others would provide materials or funds as they could. As the meeting concluded, Lucinda gathered her children, a weight lifted slightly from her shoulders. At least her children's education wouldn't be yet another casualty of their circumstances. "Mrs. Kennedy," a voice called as she headed for the door. Thomas Hayes approached, removing his hat. Up close, she could see the warmth in his gray eyes. "I wanted to thank you for speaking up. Sometimes folks need someone to remind them what's important." "It was nothing," Lucinda replied, suddenly conscious of her mended dress and worn shoes. "I just couldn't bear the thought of my children losing more than they already have." Understanding passed between them, the unspoken recognition of shared loss. "These are your children?" he asked, smiling at Lily, Emma, and Samuel. "Yes, Lily's 10, Emma's 7, and Samuel's 4. Lucinda rested a protective hand on Samuel's shoulder. "My James is 11, Thomas said, "and Catherine just turned 6 last month. Perhaps they'll be friends at school." The boy, James, stood slightly behind his father, regarding Lily with cautious interest. Catherine smiled shyly at Emma. "I'm sure they will," Lucinda replied, though she wasn't entirely certain. Her children had kept mostly to themselves since moving to Fort Stockton, carrying the shared burden of grief that set them apart from other children. "Pa," James said quietly, "shouldn't we be getting back to fix that fence before dark?" Thomas nodded. "You're right, son, Mrs. Kennedy, it was a pleasure. I look forward to working with you on the school project." As the Hayes family departed, Lucinda couldn't help but notice the way father and son moved in sync, shoulders straight, a gentle hand guiding the little girl between them. There was something about Thomas Hayes that spoke of steadiness, of roots and reliability, things she had once taken for granted in her own life. "He seems nice," Lily remarked as they walked home. "Mr. Hayes, I mean." "Yes," Lucinda agreed carefully, "he does." The temporary school arrangement began the following Monday in the town's small church. Mrs. Abbott handled the older students at one end of the room, while Lucinda worked with the younger children at the other. With benches rearranged and makeshift desks created from planks and barrels, it wasn't ideal, but it was something. Lily sat beside James Hayes, both of them among the oldest students. Emma found herself partnered with Catherine Hayes for reading exercises, their heads bent together over a shared primer. At midday, while the children ate their lunches in the churchyard, Lucinda reviewed arithmetic problems for the afternoon lesson. The church door opened, admitting Thomas Hayes with a toolbox in hand. "Mrs. Kennedy," he greeted her. "I've come to fix that loose floorboard before someone trips. Mayor said it was fine to work during the lunch hour." "Of course," Lucinda replied, suddenly aware of the wisps of hair that had escaped her careful bun. "And please call me Lucinda." "Lucinda," he repeated, his voice warming the name, "and I'm Thomas or Tom to most folks." He set to work on the troublesome board while she continued preparing her lessons, the comfortable silence broken only by the distant sound of children playing outside and the rhythmic tap of his hammer. "Your children are bright," Thomas commented after a while. "Especially Lily, Mrs. Abbott says she has a real gift for numbers." Pride swelled in Lucinda's chest. "Yes, she does. Her father used to say she'd outpace both of us by the time she was 12. "And your husband?" Thomas asked carefully. "Has he been gone long?" "Just over a year," Lucinda replied, the familiar ache dulled somewhat by time. "Fever took him quickly. We lost the farm not long after." Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My Martha passed when Catherine was barely a year old. Childbirth, the baby didn't make it either." "I'm sorry," Lucinda said softly. "It's not easy raising children alone." "No," he agreed, "it surely isn't." He hammered in the last nail and tested the board with his foot. "That should hold now." The door burst open as children began to file back in, their faces flushed from play in the autumn air. Thomas gathered his tools, nodding politely to Lucinda before leaving. Later that afternoon, as Lucinda was walking her children home, she spotted Thomas and his children riding toward their ranch south of town. He tipped his hat as they passed, and Lucinda found herself smiling in return. "James says their ranch has horses," Lily informed her mother. "Real riding horses, not just work animals." "Is that so?" Lucinda replied, noting the unusual excitement in her eldest daughter's voice. "He said his pa might teach him to break horses someday," Lily continued, "and they have a dog named Buck who herds cattle better than most men." "Catherine can't read very well," Emma chimed in. "I helped her with the hard words." "That was kind of you, Emma," Lucinda said, squeezing her middle child's hand. Samuel, who had been unusually quiet, looked up at his mother. "I miss Papa," Lucinda's heart constricted. "I know, my love." "I miss him too." "Does James miss his mama?" Samuel asked. "I expect he does," Lucinda answered carefully. "Everyone misses the people they love who aren't with them anymore." The work on the schoolhouse began in earnest the following Saturday. The men of Fort Stockton gathered with tools and determination, while the women organized a rotation of meals to keep the workers fed. Lucinda arrived with her children and a large pot of bean soup, finding the schoolyard already bustling with activity. Thomas Hayes was directing operations, his deep voice carrying across the yard as he instructed men on removing the damaged roof sections. He'd shed his coat in the morning sun, and Lucinda couldn't help but notice the strength in his shoulders as he demonstrated how to properly brace a beam. "Mrs. Kennedy," he called when he spotted her, "glad you could join us." "We've brought soup for the midday meal," she replied, suddenly feeling awkward with the pot in her hands. "A welcome sight, I'm sure." He smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "The children are playing behind the church if yours would like to join them. James and Catherine are there." Lily and Emma needed no further encouragement, hurrying off after depositing the pot on the makeshift serving table. Samuel, however, clung to his mother's skirts, watching the men work with wide eyes. "Would you like to help me, young man?" Thomas asked, crouching down to Samuel's level. "I need someone to hold my nails." Samuel looked to his mother for permission. At her nod, he cautiously approached Thomas, who produced a small leather pouch. "These are special roofing nails," Thomas explained seriously. "Very important job holding these. Think you can manage it?" Samuel's chest puffed out with importance. "Yes, sir." Lucinda watched as Thomas gently guided her son to a safe spot near where he was working, showing him how to hand over nails one at a time. Something warm and unexpected bloomed in her chest at the sight. The day progressed with steady work and community spirit. Lucinda helped serve the midday meal, making sure everyone had their fill before taking a plate for herself. She found a quiet spot in the shade of an old oak tree to rest for a moment. "Mind if I join you?" Thomas asked, plate in hand. At her gesture of welcome, he settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Your soup is excellent," he said after a few bites. "Reminds me of my mother's cooking." "Thank you," Lucinda replied. "It's nothing fancy, but it fills the belly." Sometimes the simplest things are best. Thomas glanced over to where Samuel was proudly showing James how he'd been helping. "Your boy's taken quite a shine to my James." "Samuel hasn't had many male figures in his life since his father died," Lucinda explained. "He was so young when it happened. Sometimes I worry he'll forget his father entirely." "Children are resilient," Thomas said thoughtfully. "They carry more inside them than we realize. Catherine was just a baby when her mother passed, but sometimes she'll do something, tilt her head just so, and I see Martha plain as day." Lucinda nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "Emma has her father's laugh. Every time I hear it, it's like he's still with us for just a moment." They fell silent, watching their children interact across the schoolyard. Lily was showing Catherine how to make a chain from dandelion stems, while James had hoisted Samuel onto his shoulders, the younger boy giggling with delight. "They seem to be getting along well," Thomas observed. "Yes," Lucinda agreed. "It's good to see them happy." As the afternoon wore on, dark clouds began to gather on the horizon. Thomas called for the tools to be gathered and the day's work to be wrapped up before the rain arrived. "We've made good progress," he announced to the assembled volunteers. "Another 2 Saturdays like this, and we'll have the school back in shape." The first fat raindrops began to fall as Lucinda collected her empty soup pot and called for her children. Thomas approached, holding Samuel's hand. "Let me give you a ride home," he offered. "My wagon's just over there, and this little fellow is worn out." Indeed, Samuel was rubbing his eyes tiredly, the excitement of the day catching up with him. "That's very kind, but we don't want to be a bother," Lucinda demurred, even as the rain began to fall more steadily. "No bother at all," Thomas insisted. "James, fetch the wagon, would you?" Minutes later, Lucinda found herself seated beside Thomas on the wagon bench, her children huddled with his in the back beneath a tarpaulin as the rain came down in earnest. The horses plodded steadily through the muddy streets toward her small house at the edge of town. "This weather's good for the crops," Thomas commented, though not so much for schoolhouse repairs. "No, I suppose not," Lucinda agreed, acutely aware of his presence beside her, the subtle scent of leather and wood smoke that clung to his clothes. "I wanted to ask you something, Mrs. Kennedy. Lucinda," he corrected himself. "Mrs. Abbott mentioned you're quite skilled with numbers and accounts." "I kept the books for our farm," she acknowledged, "and I had some schooling in mathematics before I married." "I could use some help getting my ranch accounts in order," Thomas said. "It's not charity," he added quickly, seeming to anticipate her response. "It's honest work that needs doing, and I'd pay a fair wage." Lucinda considered his offer. The extra money would certainly help, especially with winter approaching. "I would need to bring the children with me," she said cautiously. "I have no one to watch them." "They'd be welcome," Thomas replied. "In fact, I think James and Catherine would enjoy the company. The ranch can be a lonely place for children." The wagon pulled up in front of Lucinda's modest home. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, but the children were still reluctant to emerge from beneath the dry tarpaulin. "When would you need me?" Lucinda asked as Thomas helped her down from the wagon seat. "Perhaps one afternoon a week to start. Thursday might be good if that suits you." "Thursday would be fine," she agreed. "After school lets out." "I'll come by with the wagon," Thomas said. "And Lucinda, thank you." As the Hayes wagon pulled away, her children scampered into the house, chattering excitedly about their new friends. Lucinda stood in the doorway for a moment longer, watching until the wagon disappeared around a bend in the road, a strange flutter of anticipation in her chest that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Thursday arrived with clear skies and a crisp autumn breeze. True to his word, Thomas was waiting with his wagon when school dismissed for the day. The children piled in eagerly, Samuel and Catherine already chattering like old friends while James helped Lily climb aboard with courtly manners that made Lucinda smile. The Hayes Ranch was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy main house, a barn, and several outbuildings. A corral near the house held 3 horses that lifted their heads with interest as the wagon approached. "It's not much yet," Thomas said as he helped Lucinda down. "But it's got good potential. The previous owner let things slide in his later years." "It looks wonderful," Lucinda replied honestly. After their cramped quarters in town, the open space and solid buildings seemed almost luxurious. "Can we see the horses, Pa?" James asked, already helping Catherine and the Kennedy children from the wagon. "Stay outside the fence," Thomas cautioned. "That bay mare's still getting used to people." As the children raced toward the corral, Thomas led Lucinda to the house. The main room was simply furnished but comfortable, with a large table, several chairs, and a stone fireplace along one wall. Shelves lined another wall, holding books that surprised Lucinda with their number and variety. "You read a great deal," she observed, scanning the titles. "When there's time," Thomas replied. "My father was a schoolteacher before he took up ranching. He believed in education, even out here in the territories." A desk in the corner held stacks of papers and ledgers in disarray. "I'm afraid I've let these get quite behind," Thomas admitted, gesturing to the accounts. "The bank in El Paso wants documentation of my cattle inventory and expenses before they'll extend the loan I need for breeding stock." "I'll see what I can do," Lucinda said, already assessing the task before her. Do you have a system in place, or shall I create one? For the next few hours, Lucinda sorted through invoices, receipts, and haphazard notes while Thomas explained his ranching operation. Occasionally, they would pause to check on the children, visible through the window as they explored the ranch under James's careful supervision. Your James is good with the younger ones, Lucinda remarked after watching him patiently show Samuel how to feed a chicken without frightening it. He's had to grow up fast, Thomas said with a mixture of pride and regret. Taking care of his sister, helping with the ranch. Sometimes I worry he's missing out on just being a boy. Lily's the same way, Lucinda replied softly. After her father died, she became so serious, taking on responsibilities no child should have to bear. Their eyes met in shared understanding before Lucinda returned her attention to the ledger before her. I think I've got a system worked out now, she said. If you keep entries in this format, it will be much easier to track your expenses and income. As the afternoon waned into evening, delicious smells began to waft from the kitchen where Maria, the middle-aged Mexican woman who helped with cooking and housekeeping, was preparing supper. You must stay and eat with us, Thomas insisted when Lucinda began gathering her things. Maria always makes enough to feed an army. We wouldn't want to impose, please, Mama, Emma pleaded, appearing at the door with dirt smudged on her cheek and happiness shining in her eyes. Catherine says they're having enchiladas. The meal was unlike anything Lucinda had experienced in a long time, not just the flavorful food, but the lively conversation and laughter that filled the kitchen. Maria fussed over all the children equally, insisting they eat second helpings and praising Samuel's Spanish pronunciation when he carefully thanked her. After supper, the children gathered in the main room where James demonstrated a wooden puzzle his father had made. Thomas and Lucinda remained at the table, drinking coffee and watching their families interact with a sense of contented surprise. They fit together well, don't they? Thomas observed quietly. Like they've known each other always. Lucinda nodded, unable to deny the truth of his words. In just a short time, their children had formed bonds that seemed to bridge the gaps left by their respective losses. The ride back to town was peaceful, the children drowsy from food and play. Samuel fell asleep against James's shoulder while Emma and Catherine whispered secrets to each other beneath the stars. Lily sat with quiet dignity beside them, occasionally pointing out constellations she recognized. At Lucinda's door, Thomas handed her an envelope. For today's work, he said. And I hope you'll consider coming back next week. There's still plenty to organize. Lucinda felt the weight of the envelope, knowing without looking that it contained more than fair compensation for her time. Thank you, Mr. Hayes Thomas. We would be glad to return. In the weeks that followed, Thursday afternoons at the Hayes Ranch became a fixture in the Kennedy family's life. The schoolhouse repairs progressed steadily, with the roof completed just as the first light snow dusted Fort Stockton in early December. The temporary arrangement at the church had fostered unexpected friendships, not just between the children, but among the adults as well. Lucinda found herself looking forward to her time at the ranch, where Thomas's quiet strength and thoughtfulness created a sense of security she hadn't felt since before her husband's death. They worked side by side on the ranch accounts, their conversations gradually deepening from business matters to personal hopes and memories. Christmas is coming, Thomas remarked one Thursday as they finished the day's accounting work. Outside, the children were helping James and Maria decorate the house with pine boughs and ribbon. Do you have plans? Just a quiet day at home, Lucinda replied. I've put aside a little for small gifts for the children and will attend the church service. Thomas hesitated, then said, We would be honored if you and your children would join us for Christmas dinner. Nothing fancy, but Maria makes a fine roast, and the children seem to enjoy each other's company so much. Lucinda looked out the window where Lily was helping Catherine hang a wreath, while James showed Samuel and Emma how to make paper snowflakes. That would be lovely, thank you. On Christmas Day, after the morning church service, Thomas arrived with the wagon festooned with evergreen branches and red ribbons. The children climbed aboard excitedly, their meager packages of homemade gifts clutched carefully in mittened hands. The Hayes Ranch was transformed for the holiday. Candles glowed in every window, and a small pine tree stood in the corner of the main room, decorated with paper ornaments, strings of cranberries, and a carved wooden star at the top. "Merry Christmas," Thomas greeted them, looking unusually formal in a clean white shirt and dark vest. His eyes lingered on Lucinda in her best dress, the navy blue one she had carefully refreshed with new lace collar and cuffs, a small extravagance from her earnings at the ranch. Dinner was a feast beyond what Lucinda could have provided at home: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and Maria's special cinnamon apple pie for dessert. The children chattered happily, pulling crackers that Thomas had ordered from a catalog and donning the paper crowns inside. After the meal came the exchange of gifts. Lucinda had knitted scarves for James and Catherine and a warm hat for Thomas. Her children had made simple but heartfelt presents. Lily had fashioned a leather bookmark for James, Emma had created a paper doll family for Catherine, and Samuel had painstakingly colored a picture of horses for Thomas. In return, the Hayes family presented them with equally thoughtful gifts. Catherine gave the girls each a small rag doll dressed in colorful scraps, while James had carved a wooden horse for Samuel. Thomas's gift to Lucinda was a beautifully bound journal with her name stamped in gold on the cover. "For your thoughts," he said quietly as she ran her fingers over the smooth leather. "A remarkable woman should record her remarkable life." As evening approached, the children gathered around the fireplace while Thomas read the Christmas story from his family Bible, his deep voice bringing the ancient words to life. Lucinda watched her children's faces in the firelight, their expressions more peaceful and content than she had seen in a long time. When it came time to leave, a light snow was falling, silvering the landscape in the fading light. "Perhaps you should stay the night," Thomas suggested, concern evident in his voice as he looked at the darkening sky. "The roads will be slippery and it's getting late." "I wouldn't want to impose," Lucinda began, but Thomas shook his head. "There's plenty of room. The girls can share Catherine's room and the boys can bunk with James. You can take the spare room." The children's pleading faces made the decision easy. "Thank you, that would be sensible." That night, after the children were settled, Lucinda found herself standing on the porch, watching the snow fall in the moonlight. The door opened behind her and Thomas stepped out, offering her a shawl. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said, gazing out at his land transformed by snow. "Yes," Lucinda agreed. "Peaceful." They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Thomas spoke again. "Having you and your children here today, it made this place feel like a home again." Lucinda turned to look at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "It felt that way to us too." "Lucinda," he said, his voice gentle, "I know it hasn't been very long since we met and we both carry our own sorrows, but I find myself thinking of you often, wondering if perhaps in time there might be something more between us." Her heart quickened at his words. "Thomas, you don't need to answer now," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here." Snowflakes caught in her eyelashes as she considered his words. "It's been so long since I allowed myself to think beyond each day's survival," she admitted. "The children have been my whole world, as they should be," Thomas replied. "My children are my world too, but perhaps our worlds could overlap more permanently someday." Before Lucinda could respond, the door opened again and James appeared, a concerned look on his young face. "Pa, Samuel's having a nightmare. He's asking for his mother." The moment broken, Lucinda hurried inside to comfort her son, finding him tearful and disoriented in the unfamiliar room. "Mama's here," she soothed, gathering him into her arms. "Everything's all right." "I dreamed Papa was lost in the snow," Samuel hiccuped against her shoulder. "I couldn't find him." "Esich, darling, Papa's not lost. He's watching over us from heaven, remember?" Lucinda stroked his hair, feeling the familiar ache of absence. James stood awkwardly in the doorway until his father appeared behind him. "Is there anything we can do?" Thomas asked quietly. "Some warm milk might help," Lucinda suggested. As Thomas and James went to the kitchen, Lucinda continued to rock Samuel gently. By the time they returned with the milk, Samuel had calmed somewhat, though his small hand still clutched tightly to Lucinda's. "Here you go, partner," Thomas said, handing the cup to Samuel. "This will help you sleep better." Samuel accepted the milk with a shy "thank you," his eyes red-rimmed but no longer frightened. "Would you like me to tell you a story?" Thomas offered. "About the bravest little cowboy in Texas." Samuel nodded, and Thomas settled onto the edge of the bed, beginning a tale about a boy who saved his ranch from rustlers with nothing but courage and a clever dog. As he spoke, Samuel's eyelids grew heavy, and by the story's end, he was fast asleep. "You're good with him," Lucinda whispered as they tiptoed from the room. "He's a good boy," Thomas replied. "All of your children are." In the hallway outside the children's rooms, Lucinda found herself standing close to Thomas, the house quiet around them. "About what you said earlier," she began hesitantly. "There's no rush," Thomas assured her. "I just wanted you to know how I feel." "I'm not saying no," Lucinda clarified. "I'm just saying I need time. The children and we've been on our own for so long, it's hard to imagine anything different." Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Time is something I can give." The next morning dawned clear and cold, the snow glistening in the winter sunlight. After a hearty breakfast, Thomas hitched the horses to the sleigh rather than the wagon, much to the children's delight. The ride back to town was filled with laughter as they glided over the snow-covered road, bells jingling on the harnesses. Lucinda found herself relaxing into the moment, enjoying the simple pleasure of being together. At her door, Thomas helped her down from the sleigh, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment. "Thank you for sharing Christmas with us," he said. "Thank you for having us," she replied, suddenly shy under his warm gaze. As January turned to February, the Thursday visits to the ranch continued, becoming the highlight of the week for both families. The children's bonds grew stronger, with James teaching Lily to ride and Samuel following the older boy everywhere like a devoted shadow. Emma and Catherine became inseparable, creating elaborate games and stories together. Lucinda found herself observing Thomas with new awareness, noticing the gentleness in his hands as he showed Samuel how to feed a newborn lamb, the patience in his voice as he explained ranch operations to Lily's curious questions, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him in difficult moments. One Thursday in late February, as winter began to loosen its grip on the land, Thomas suggested an afternoon ride to show Lucinda the furthest reaches of his property. "The children will be fine with Maria," he assured her, "and there's something I'd like you to see." Curious, Lucinda agreed, mounting the gentle mare Thomas had saddled for her. They rode side by side through rolling pastureland, Thomas pointing out landmarks and sharing his plans for the ranch's future. "This is what I wanted to show you," he said finally, reining in his horse atop a small rise. Below them stretched a meadow, sheltered by hills on three sides where the first early wildflowers were beginning to appear through patches of melting snow. "It's beautiful," Lucinda said sincerely, taking in the peaceful scene. "I thought perhaps, someday." "This might be a good spot for a house," Thomas said carefully. "A bigger house for a larger family. There's good water nearby, protection from the wind and the view," he gestured toward the distant mountains, blue against the horizon. Lucinda's heart skipped a beat as she understood what he was suggesting. "Thomas, I'm not asking for an answer today," he said quickly. "Just thinking about possibilities." They dismounted, letting the horses graze while they walked to the edge of the meadow. Thomas picked one of the early wildflowers, a tiny blue blossom barely larger than a thimble, and offered it to Lucinda. "I never expected to find someone again," he admitted. "After Martha died, I thought that part of my life was over. I focused on the children, on making a life for them. But then I met you and something changed." Lucinda twirled the small flower between her fingers, its fragile beauty a contrast to the rugged landscape around them. "I felt the same way after Robert died," she said softly, "as if that capacity for that kind of love had died with him." "And now?" Thomas asked, his eyes searching hers. "Now I'm not so sure," she admitted. "The children adore you and yours. I've never seen Lily so animated or Samuel so confident. Even Emma seems to have blossomed in Catherine's company." "And you, Lucinda?" Thomas asked, taking a step closer. What about your happiness? The question caught her off guard. For so long, her own happiness had been secondary to her children's needs, her own desires set aside in the daily struggle to survive. I I find myself looking forward to Thursdays more than any other day, she confessed. Not just for the children's sake, but for my own. Thomas's smile was like sunrise breaking over the plains. Then perhaps when you're ready, you might consider making every day like Thursday. In that moment, with the first hints of spring around them and hope blooming in her heart, Lucinda could almost imagine it a life rebuilt, a family reconfigured but whole again. Not replacing what was lost, but creating something new and equally precious. "I'll consider it," she promised, and the joy in Thomas's eyes made her own heart feel strangely light. They returned to the ranch to find the children engaged in an elaborate game of make-believe, with James as the sheriff, Lily as his deputy, and the younger ones playing various townspeople and outlaws. Their laughter echoed across the yard, a sound so carefree and uninhibited that it brought tears to Lucinda's eyes. "They're healing," Thomas said quietly beside her. "All of them?" "Yes," she agreed. "I think perhaps we all are." As winter gave way to spring, the land around Fort Stockton awakened with new life. The schoolhouse reopened, sturdy and improved, and the town celebrated with a picnic on the grounds. Lucinda found herself increasingly integrated into the community, no longer just the widow on the edge of town, but a respected member of Fort Stockton society. Thomas made no secret of his interest in her, calling at her home on Sundays after church and bringing small gifts for her and the children. The town buzzed with gentle speculation, but Lucinda paid it little mind, focused instead on the gradual evolution of her feelings. One Sunday in April, Thomas invited Lucinda and her children for a picnic by the creek that ran through his property. The day was perfect warm sunshine, a gentle breeze, and the creek burbling merrily over smooth stones. The children scattered to explore, leaving the adults to spread the blanket and unpack the picnic basket. "I received a letter from the bank in El Paso," Thomas mentioned as they worked side by side. "The loan has been approved. Your accounting work made all the difference." "That's wonderful news," Lucinda replied. "You'll be able to expand the herd as you planned." "Yes." Thomas hesitated, then added, "There's something else I've been meaning to discuss with you." Before he could continue, a piercing scream cut through the peaceful afternoon. They both leapt to their feet, recognizing Catherine's voice. "The creek," James shouted from somewhere in the distance. Thomas and Lucinda ran toward the sound, hearts pounding. They found James pulling a soaking wet Samuel from the shallow creek while Catherine stood on the bank, crying hysterically. Lily held a terrified Emma, who was pointing at the water. "He fell in trying to catch a frog," James explained breathlessly as Thomas took Samuel into his arms. "The current pulled him under for a moment." Samuel coughed and sputtered, his small body shivering despite the warm day. "I'm sorry," he hiccuped, looking fearfully at his mother. "Oh, Samuel," Lucinda gathered him from Thomas, her hands trembling as she checked him for injuries. "You must never go near the water alone." "James saved him, Mama," Lily said, her face pale. "He jumped right in when Samuel fell." Thomas clasped his son's shoulder, pride evident in his face. "Quick thinking, son." "I promised to look after him," James said simply, water dripping from his clothes. Back at the ranch house, Maria fussed over Samuel and James, wrapping them in warm blankets and making hot cocoa despite the spring weather. The incident had shaken everyone, bringing into sharp focus how precious and precarious life could be. That evening, as they prepared to return to town, Samuel fell asleep in Thomas's arms, exhausted from his ordeal. Thomas carried him to the wagon, settling him gently on the seat. "He'll be fine," Thomas assured Lucinda, seeing the worry that still creased her brow. "Children are remarkably resilient." "I know," she said. "It's just for a moment there I thought I might lose him too." Thomas's expression grew serious. "I understand that fear all too well." As he helped her into the wagon, their hands met and held for a moment longer than necessary. "Lucinda," Thomas said quietly, "what I was trying to say earlier before the accident, I wanted to ask if you would consider becoming my wife." The directness of the proposal took her breath away, though in truth she had begun to anticipate it. Thomas, I know it's sudden, he continued, and I know we both carry the memories of those we've lost, but I've grown to care for you deeply and our children. Well, they already act as if they belong to the same family. It was true. Through the winter and into spring, the 5 children had formed bonds that went beyond friendship. James had become a big brother to Samuel, protective and guiding. Lily and Catherine shared secrets and dreams, while Emma floated between all of them, bringing her special brand of sunshine. I care for you too, Lucinda admitted, her heart pounding. More than I thought possible, but marriage is such a significant step. It is, Thomas agreed. Which is why I want you to take all the time you need to consider it. I'm not going anywhere, Lucinda. The children and I will be here, hoping, but understanding if your answer is no. The ride back to town was quiet, each adult lost in thought while the children dozed against each other in the back of the wagon. At her door, Thomas helped her down, his touch gentle and respectful. Think about it, he said simply. That's all I ask. In the days that followed, Lucinda found herself examining her feelings with new clarity. The loss of Robert had left a void in her life, but Thomas had shown her that her heart still had the capacity to care, to hope, to love again. It wasn't a replacement for what she had lost, but something new and different, equally valuable in its own way. The children, sensing something significant in the air, watched her with curious eyes. One evening, as she tucked Lily into bed, her eldest daughter asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between them. Do you love Mr. Hayes, Mama? Lucinda smoothed Lily's hair, considering how to answer. I care for him very much, she said carefully. James says his pa wants to marry you, Lily continued, her eyes serious in the lamplight. He says we might all live together at the ranch. Would that bother you? Lucinda asked, watching her daughter's face closely. If we became part of their family. Lily was quiet for a moment, then said, I think we already are in a way, and I like the ranch better than town. There's more space to breathe. What about your father? Lucinda asked softly. I don't want you to think I'm forgetting him or that Mr. Hayes would replace him. Papa would want us to be happy, Lily said with a wisdom beyond her years. He always said that, and Mr. Hayes makes you smile again. I remember how you used to smile at Papa that way. Tears prickled at Lucinda's eyes. You're very observant, my love, so will you? Lily persisted. Marry him? I haven't decided yet, Lucinda admitted. It's a big change for all of us. But a good one, I think, Lily said, surprising her mother with her certainty. The next Thursday, when Thomas came to collect them for their usual visit to the ranch, Lucinda asked if they might speak privately before departing. They stood on her small porch while the children waited by the wagon, barely containing their excitement for the day ahead. I've been thinking about your proposal, Lucinda began, her hands clasped tightly before her. And, Thomas prompted gently when she hesitated. And I believe my answer is yes, she said, the words sending a rush of emotion through her. I would like to marry you, Thomas Hayes. The joy that transformed his face was like nothing she had ever seen, making him look years younger and somehow more vibrant. Lucinda, he breathed, taking her hands in his, you've made me the happiest man in Texas. Before you celebrate too much, she cautioned, there's something we should discuss. The children, should we tell them now? Thomas asked, glancing toward the wagon where the 5 children waited, uncharacteristically patient. Lucinda smiled, suddenly certain. I think they may already know. Indeed, when they approached the wagon hand in hand, 5 pairs of eyes watched them with varying degrees of hope and expectation. Children, Thomas began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his face. Mrs. Kennedy, Lucinda has done me the great honor of agreeing to become my wife. The response was immediate and joyful. Catherine and Emma shrieked with delight, hugging each other and then their parents. Samuel clapped his hands while James nodded with solemn satisfaction, as if a plan had come together exactly as he had expected. Only Lily remained quiet, though her eyes shone with a happiness Lucinda hadn't seen since before her father's death. Does this mean we'll all leave together? Catherine asked, bouncing with excitement. Like a real family? Yes, sweetheart, Thomas confirmed, lifting her into his arms. That's exactly what it means. And I'll have sisters, she continued, looking at Lily and Emma with delight. Real sisters, And brothers, Lucinda added, smiling at James and Samuel. The children's excitement carried them through the ride to the ranch, their chatter filling the wagon with plans and questions. By the time they arrived, it was decided that Lily and Catherine would share the largest bedroom, with Emma joining them, while James would make room for Samuel in his. "When will the wedding be, Pa?" James asked as they unloaded supplies from the wagon. Thomas looked to Lucinda, leaving the decision to her. "I thought perhaps in June," she suggested, "when school is out for the summer. That gives us just over a month to prepare," Thomas calculated. "Is that enough time?" "More than enough," Lucinda assured him. "I don't want anything elaborate, just family and a few close friends." As May unfolded into June, Fort Stockton buzzed with news of the upcoming wedding. The town had watched the gradual coming together of the Hayes and Kennedy families with approval and now rallied to help with preparations. Mrs. Abbott organized a sewing circle to make a new dress for Lucinda, while Mr. Hanson from the general store contributed his finest flour and sugar for the wedding cake. On a perfect June morning, with wildflowers blooming across the plains, Lucinda Kennedy became Lucinda Hayes in a simple ceremony at the Fort Stockton church. She wore a dress of pale blue silk, a gift from the ladies of the town, and carried a bouquet of prairie flowers gathered by her daughters that morning. Thomas waited for her at the altar, James standing proudly beside him as best man. Lily, Emma, and Catherine served as bridesmaids, their dresses matching in a lighter shade of blue, while Samuel carried the rings on a small cushion sewn by Maria. "I take you, Lucinda, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Thomas said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." As Lucinda repeated the vows, she felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. This was not a replacement for what she had lost, but a new beginning, a different kind of love built on shared experiences and mutual respect. The wedding celebration continued at the Hayes Ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard beneath canvas awnings. The whole town seemed to have turned out to wish them well, bringing dishes to share and gifts to mark the occasion. "Mrs. Hayes," Thomas said, finding a quiet moment with her amidst the festivities. "How does it sound?" "Wonderful," Lucinda replied honestly. "Though I think I'll need time to get used to it." "We have all the time in the world," he assured her, his eyes full of promise. As the afternoon progressed, Lucinda found herself watching their children now playing together in the yard. James had organized a game of tag, making sure Samuel could keep up with the older ones. Lily and Catherine sat in the shade of an old oak tree, making flower crowns for themselves and Emma, who shuttled between the two groups with boundless energy. "They truly became a family before we did," Lucinda observed as Thomas joined her. "Children see more clearly sometimes," he replied. "They recognize what belongs together." The sun was setting by the time the last guests departed, leaving the new family alone at the ranch. Maria had prepared a special supper, after which she discreetly retired to her small cottage behind the main house, giving the family privacy on their first night together. The children, exhausted from the excitement of the day, fell asleep quickly in their new arrangements. Lucinda and Thomas moved from room to room, tucking them in and marveling at how natural it felt, this blending of their families. "Are you happy?" Thomas asked as they stood in the doorway of the girls' room, watching the peaceful faces of Lily, Emma, and Catherine in the soft lamplight. "More than I thought possible," Lucinda admitted. "It feels right, all of us together." Later, in the privacy of what was now their bedroom, Thomas took her hands in his. "I want you to know," he said seriously, "that I will always honor the memory of Robert in your heart and the children's. He will always be part of who you are, who they are." Tears welled in Lucinda's eyes at his understanding. "And I will respect Martha's place in your past," she promised. "Catherine deserves to know about her mother." "We'll build something new together," Thomas said, drawing her close, without forgetting what came before. As summer unfolded into fall, the Hayes family settled into a rhythm of ranch life. Lucinda's small house in town was rented to the new schoolteacher, providing a modest additional income. The children thrived in their new environment, each finding their place in the family structure. James took his role as oldest brother seriously, teaching Samuel to ride and helping Lily improve her horsemanship. Catherine and Emma became inseparable, creating their own secret language and elaborate games that often involved the dolls they'd received as wedding gifts from Mrs. Abbott. Lucinda found unexpected fulfillment in ranch life. Besides keeping the accounts in perfect order, she established a thriving vegetable garden and helped Thomas with the correspondence necessary for his expanding cattle business. In the evenings, the family gathered around the table for meals and afterward for reading or music, with Lucinda playing the small piano Thomas had ordered from St. Louis as a wedding present. By Christmas, the changes in the meadow Thomas had shown her became apparent. Foundation stones marked the outline of a larger house, and lumber was stacked nearby, protected from the weather by tarpaulins. In the spring, Thomas explained as they walked the property on a crisp December morning, "We'll begin building. The children need more room, and I thought, perhaps." "Perhaps what?" Lucinda prompted when he hesitated. "Perhaps we might need room for additions to the family," he suggested cautiously, "if that's something you might want." The idea of another child, a child born of their love, brought a rush of emotion Lucinda hadn't expected. "I would like that very much," she admitted, "though I'm not as young as I once was." "You're perfect as you are," Thomas assured her, gathering her into his arms. "Whatever God sees fit to bless us with, I'll be grateful." The new year of 1879 brought both challenges and joys. A harsh February blizzard threatened the cattle herd, requiring Thomas and James to work day and night to protect the animals. Lucinda worried constantly, but felt pride in how capably her eldest stepson handled the crisis alongside his father. In March, as the snow began to melt and the first shoots of green appeared on the plains, Lucinda confirmed what she had begun to suspect. By late October, a new Hayes would join their family. "A baby," Catherine exclaimed when they gathered the children to share the news. "A real baby brother or sister?" "Yes," Lucinda confirmed, warmed by Thomas's proud smile beside her, "though we won't know whether it's a brother or sister until autumn." The reactions varied from excitement, Catherine and Emma, to thoughtful curiosity, Lily, to practical questions, James, to simple acceptance, Samuel, who at 6 was more concerned with whether the baby would like the wooden toys he was learning to carve under Thomas's guidance. Construction on the new house began in April, with Thomas overseeing every aspect of the building. By August, the structure was complete enough to move into, though finishing work continued on the upper floor. The new home featured separate bedrooms for the boys and girls, a spacious kitchen where Maria reigned supreme, and a comfortable nursery adjacent to the master bedroom. As Lucinda's time grew closer, the children became increasingly protective of her. James insisted on doing the heavier chores she normally handled, while Lily took over much of the cooking under Maria's supervision. Even Samuel contributed, bringing her wildflowers each day and reading to the baby from his primer, solemnly explaining the alphabet to her growing belly. On a golden October afternoon, with the cottonwoods along the creek turned to flaming yellow, Lucinda gave birth to a healthy son. Thomas, who had paced the porch throughout her labor, wept unashamedly when Maria placed the infant in his arms. "Robert Thomas Hayes," Lucinda said softly when the children were allowed in to meet their new brother. "For both his fathers." Thomas's eyes met hers over the baby's downy head, understanding and love flowing between them. "It's perfect," he agreed, "a perfect name for a perfect boy." The children crowded around, marveling at tiny fingers and toes, debating who he resembled most. "He has Mama's nose," Lily declared, while James insisted he had Pa's strong chin. "He's just a baby," Samuel said practically. "He'll grow into his own self soon enough." As autumn deepened into winter, the Hayes family adjusted to life with a new baby. The older children took turns helping with little Robert, with even James showing unexpected gentleness when rocking his baby brother to sleep. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside and a fire crackling in the hearth, Lucinda sat in the rocking chair Thomas had made for her, nursing Robert while watching the other children hang stockings along the mantel. Thomas sat nearby, carving a final wooden animal to complete the Noah's Ark set he'd been creating as a Christmas gift for Samuel. "I never imagined this," Lucinda said softly, gesturing to the scene before them, 5 children working together with laughter and occasional squabbles, the home they'd built warm and secure around them. "What's that?" Thomas asked, setting aside his carving. "This happiness," she elaborated. "After Robert died, I thought that part of my life was over. I focused only on survival, on keeping the children fed and sheltered. The idea of joy, of a complete family again, it seemed impossible." Thomas moved to kneel beside her chair, one hand gently touching his namesake's downy head. "God has ways of surprising us," he said. "When I bought this ranch, I thought it would just be the 3 of us, me, James, and Catherine. I never imagined we'd become 7. Soon to be 8, Lucinda said with a small smile, enjoying the look of confusion that crossed Thomas's face. "Doctor Wilson confirmed it yesterday. Next summer around July." Thomas's expression transformed from confusion to wonder to joy in the span of heartbeats. "Another baby, so soon. Apparently Robert will have a playmate close to his age," Lucinda confirmed. "Are you happy?" In answer, Thomas leaned forward and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and future and abiding love. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he assured her from across the room. James called, "Pa, come see what we've done with the tree." Hand in hand, they joined their children, their family created not by blood alone but by choice and love and the healing power of new beginnings. As Thomas lifted Samuel to place the star atop the Christmas tree, Lucinda felt the subtle movement of new life within her and gave thanks for the unexpected journey that had brought them all together. In the years that followed, the Hayes Ranch prospered along with its growing family. The summer after Robert's birth brought a daughter, Martha Lucinda, named for both her grandmothers. 2 years later, another son joined the family, followed by a final daughter when Lucinda was 40. Through it all, the joys and sorrows, the challenges of ranch life in the Texas frontier, the gradual growing up and moving out of the older children, Thomas and Lucinda remained steady partners, their love deepening with each passing season. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their grandchildren play in the yard, James's 2 boys racing with Lily's daughter, while Catherine's twins built a fort beneath the old oak tree, Thomas took Lucinda's hand in his. "Do you remember that town meeting?" he asked. "The one about the school roof?" "Of course," she replied, smiling at the memory. "It seems a lifetime ago." "I knew then," Thomas admitted. "When you stood up and spoke about the importance of education with such passion and conviction despite your circumstances, I knew you were someone special. And I thought you were just being charitable," Lucinda teased, offering to help a struggling widow. "Charitable?" Thomas laughed. "I was smitten from the first moment. It just took me a while to admit it to myself." As the sun set over the land they had nurtured together, casting long shadows across the meadow where they had built their home and raised their family, Lucinda leaned her head against her husband's shoulder. "The children knew before we did," she observed. "They saw what belonged together before we recognized it ourselves." "The wisdom of innocence," Thomas agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Thank God for it." In the gathering twilight, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and love well nurtured, Lucinda Hayes found herself filled with gratitude for the unexpected journey that had begun with a collapsed roof and a town meeting, bringing together 2 broken families and healing them into something stronger and more beautiful than either could have imagined alone.